Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Asashio B. This is the last of the rare Black Friday ships. Unfortunately, only available for real money purchase, the only ones that you cannot get for doubloons, at least this Black Friday. Sad to see that, but that is the case. So with Canadian dollars, it comes out to 35 or almost 36 Canadian dollars. And for that price, it's not bad. It's a Torp boat though, through and through. I think you probably already knew that, but this is very much a torpedo focused destroyer. And if you know me, that is not exactly my specialty. It's not what I like playing all that much, and it's not what I'm good at in this game. So keep that in mind as a bit of context as we go into talk about what this ship is and whether or not I think it's worth it. It's basically taking a Kagero. If we take a look at the ship parameters, we basically just copy over a Kagero and tweak the torpedoes. That is the main difference here. So the torpedoes, instead of going 10 kilometers, they go 20 kilometers. They're also Deepwater Torps. So instead of having a 1.7 kilometer detect on these torpedoes, it's only 0.9 kilometers, meaning there's much reduced reaction time. You have about a 9.4 second reaction time to Kagero Torps and only 5 seconds to Asashio Torps, assuming you don't have Hydra or your teammates aren't spotting them. The downside, you only hit battleships and carriers. So you hyper counter those two, specifically battleships. It's very unlikely you're going to get situations like this where the carrier gets caught out on a flank like this, but you do really absolutely crush battleships specifically. And you get a reload booster. Kagero does also get the reload booster, and it allows you to dump out a nice second set of torpedoes every once in a while. Much like the French ships, any of the French battleships or cruisers that have reload boosters, I find myself getting a little too greedy and saving the Torps or that reload booster for the perfect opportunity. When you play these ships, you need to at least use one, two, or two of them just immediately when you have the chance. Otherwise, you're just leaving extra damage on the table that is essentially being wasted. We're going to start this video, though, with a dev strike on a carrier. Feels good, man. Feels good. 20-kilometer torps means you can do that even if you're very far away. You don't have to necessarily get in range like this, like a Kagero would have to. A Kagero probably would have done a similar thing there, given the range. But with Asashio, you can target enemy battleships and certainly even carriers at the back of the map. And it makes it very comfortable to play against those ships. It allows you to play into this very passive meta and still have some utility, or at least be able to do some damage, prevent people from pushing, or create torpedo crossfire threats across the map from where they won't be expecting. I know myself as a battleship player, I often I'm frustrated with myself when I eat Asashio Torps, and it happens relatively frequently simply because you don't expect it. At tier 8, you're not thinking about an Asashio across the map possibly just sending some zoning torps through a gap, and then they pop up right next to your ship. It's pretty good for those situations, and this game I think is an excellent example of how Asashio lets you play this torpedo threat, this torpedo destroyer role in today's meta, in the worst of today's meta, and still have an okay time. A Kagero just gets locked out of these situations. Double carrier, double sub. Sure, there's a lot of battleships, which does help us have some more utility, but it's miserable playing into these kind of games for any ship, honestly. I really hope Wargaming changes the way the matchmaker works and removes these games. Double carrier is bad enough, double sub is bad enough, but at the same time, are you kidding me? No fun is going to be had typically in these games. And now we're torping about on North Carolina. This might be one of the downsides, I suppose, is that a lot of the times when you're torping battleships at further range, they're typically going to be angled to you. When you're getting those broadside salvos on battleships, you're oftentimes flanking, which means you're getting closer to them, typically. So then, how often are you torping things with an Asashio outside of that 10-kilometer window that Kagero also has? That's really the difference here. Whether or not this ship is worth it, or at least whether or not this ship is an improvement over a Kagero in this torpedo area. It's how often are you making use of that extra range? Or, fair enough, the reduced reaction time. That is a benefit as well. Certainly the Deepwater Torps on the Pan-Asian destroyer line are incredible with their, I think, 0.8 kilometer detect. Very, very difficult to avoid those. And same here with the Asashio. We used our booster, but in this case, I think the North Carolina sees those torpedoes. He's going to avoid them all. It is bow on, so it's a little bit of RNG certainly involved if we're going to hit them. And I think the sub spotted them. That's the problem here. You don't have the ability to torp cruisers or destroyers. The other Deepwaters from the Pan-Asian line are at least still able to hit cruisers, not DDs. But it means that oftentimes when you're torping through to the back line, to those battleships, to that carrier, they might just pass under cruisers or destroyers along their way, and then they're just spotted. And that concealment advantage these torpedoes have is a little bit reduced, in my opinion. And then there's situations, obviously, where that isn't going to happen, where you're not torping through the entire enemy team to the enemy battleships. But at that point, aren't you close enough to use Kagero Torps? Yeah. This is nitpicking. I'm sorry. This is definitely nitpicking. But to me, this ship gives up so much to get these range and this ability to not have the torps be seen as quickly. And I miss the ability to torp DDs. I miss the ability, certainly, to torp out cruisers. And I'm not sure I would want to give that up personally. But let's bring it back to the beginning and remind you, I'm not really a torpedo boat player. So take that with a grain of salt, obviously. This is coming from someone who doesn't particularly enjoy this playstyle. I find it a little bit boring, to be honest with you. I feel like I'm not really doing a whole lot, even though I am. Like, some of these games, we're going to get top score with almost no damage. You're an insanely powerful spotting destroyer. Very, very strong. It's very difficult to actually spot out a good Asashio player. Someone who's playing around their concealment well. 5.4 detect is very, very difficult to find. Unless there's carriers, obviously, or subs that maybe are pushing you out. But DD versus DD, it's very difficult to deal with an Asashio with teammates backing it up. That's the key here. Asashio, Kagero, the guns hit hard. Certainly, the alpha damage is pretty nice, but the reload is abysmal. So your actual DPM on the guns is quite low for your tier. You're not going to be out DPMing anyone. And your HP pool, this is with Survivability Expert here. We're 17.9, which is fine. It's good enough, but it's certainly not good enough to take a lot of gunfights. This is a ship that needs to be spotting the enemy DDs, spotting those cruisers, and having your teammates come through and deal the damage. Whereas you are specifically focused on battleships. And for me, that's a little bit too compromised. That's giving up a little bit too much. But again, not necessarily a torpedo player. At least I'm not really interested in these quite as much. I will say an interesting counterpoint or comparison is actually La Pampa. I've been playing La Pampa recently, of course. That ship recently, the NDA lifted, trying to get some more good games in it. And a problem I have with that ship is actually that the range just isn't there for the tier 10 meta of passive ships and the radars. And I am complaining about that. Whether or not I'm complaining appropriately about that, I don't know yet. Still got to play that ship more. But it is something to consider that Asashio allows you to play a torp boat, stay outside of radar range, and still launch your torpedoes. It's one of the main reasons I talk about gearing still being a relatively competent torp boat, because you have the range to still impact the game. And Asashio certainly has that. So there are some benefits here. If you love Kagero, if you love Shima, that whole line, and you want a premium tier 8 offering that allows you to really smash and hyper focus in on taking out battleships, and you're okay with not hitting torps on DDs, because let's be honest, your torps aren't going to hit DDs that often. They are spotted from the moon when you're playing the standard line. And against cruisers, a lot of the time you're playing a little far back anyway, just because you're worried about radars, especially as we get to higher tier. So you're still oftentimes, even in a torpedo boat that can hit cruisers, can hit destroyers, you're not specifically going out of your way to hit those targets. You're still wanting to find those battleships, those juicy battleship broadsides, and then you send those torps in for a dev strike. So maybe it's fine. Maybe I'm over critiquing these torps, but in this game, if we could have hit cruisers, I actually would have hit that cruiser while those torps were on the way to the Nagato. as well as just being able to torp smokes. There's oftentimes really good value in torping a destroyer's smoke early game. Using RPF to torp the other side of cap zones can be a really good option as well to take out enemy destroyers early, especially when you have so many torpedoes that do so much damage. You just have to hit one, and you're winning that engagement. Even though Asashio doesn't have the best guns, or torp boats typically don't have the best guns, if you land a torp, I mean, even the best gunboats in the game are going to struggle to finish you off before you are going to kill them. Here, landing a few torps on the Massachusetts bow on. That reload booster certainly can help. It was a little too early on that booster to get a flood, unfortunately, but still managed to do some decent work with those guns early game. A real massive value point here of the concealment is that you are dictating the engagement. Outside of carrier games, again, we kind of set carriers and subs to the side in their own little corner when we're talking about these things. I tend to focus on surface ship combat. That's really what I'm talking about usually in these videos. So I like to set those to a side and pretend they don't exist. Unfortunately, you can't always do that. They are in your games, but it is something that Asashio excels at, Kagero excels at. When you're out spotting enemy destroyers, straight up, you decide when the engagement starts, when it's most advantageous for you, and you can just disengage or decide, no, I'm not going to take this engagement, and not open up. That is hugely valuable, especially as you get better at destroyer play. You're going to value that concealment more and more as you get better at the game. It's going to allow you to push flanks much easier than even some gunboats are actually capable of. The value of spotting is massive in this game, and these destroyers can do a great job of it. It really is extremely powerful to have a destroyer that knows how to outspot and when to play aggressive, when to get the spotting damage in, when to go for those torpedo runs on closer range enemy ships. Here we're going to take out a Colorado and a Char Norse at close range. Here's an example of where I don't think there's much difference between Kagero and Asashio, but maybe the detection on the Torps helps us here. The speed, the damage, and all that is the same out to 10 kilometers. But for me, Asashio is a bit of a skip just because I'm not a torp boat kind of guy. It's not the ships that I enjoy as much. So if you're a torpedo boat kind of person, you enjoy the Japanese destroyer line, I would definitely recommend getting a Kagero before buying this ship. Just get that for free and then see how you feel. If you want that extra range, if you want these extra range torps for specifically battleships and carriers, then I would say this is a worthy pickup, especially with the discount, right? When we're talking about these 4 ships that have been removed, Asashio, John Bart, Massachusetts, and Alaska. Alaska is the last one. The 2 tier 9s obviously have a much less discount. They're at 15% off a regular tier 9 purchase, where at tier 8 and below, you get 30% off a regular tier 8 purchase. So it's a lot easier for me to recommend the 2 tier 8 ships over the tier 9 ships, just because you're spending quite a bit less money. Even up front, just tier 8s cost less than tier 9s, but that extra discount adds up. And for $30 US, I mean, I haven't done the translation, so or the conversion, so I don't actually know, but there's a lot of fun to be had. Certainly for me, obviously Massachusetts first, but you saw that on the tier list. But for Asashio, for this torpedo play, I can definitely see it. Here, getting up over 100k damage, pretty nice. 9 torp hits, getting a dev strike even. We're trying to do the funny thing of you pop the damage control on the battleship, and then being Japanese guns, they have high fire chance, so you get that insta fire. Didn't quite get it here. The clip would have been quite funny though. And contesting caps, we got a solo cap and a assisted cap too. It is strong. It is certainly strong. I just find myself enjoying the gunboat playstyle more. It's a little more action packed, a little bit less time waiting around. Maybe that's the other portion of torpedo boats. You got to be patient. You got to be very patient. Wait for that appropriate, the best time to launch those torpedoes. That's when you're going to get the most value out of it. I just might not be patient enough, and then I'm wasting a lot of these torpedo salvos, and then complaining that the torps don't hit very often. That certainly is an issue that I will have with torpedo boats. Last game I have for you here, we're going to do, a little spoiler, we're going to do 23,000 damage, and we're going to be top score. Just to show you the value of spotting. and that I would prefer to play gunboats personally. I'm a bit simple like that, where I like the big damage number in the top right corner, even though the utility here is excellent. Deciding when to deal damage to this enemy destroyer, I chose when the engagement started, landing some long-range torps on the Alsace there, and we used our smoke to get away. And then Alaska probably going to push in with radar, so I ran away. But still, we get up to 20,000 damage. All but 3,000 has been done. 90k spotting damage. I was just chilling, reversed into the cap, waiting for an opportunity to torp, slowly seeing if I can land some torps on this Alsace or the Bungo at pretty far ranges. And then the DD's back. And again, we just choose when to open up. And here's an example of smoking too early. This is what I shouldn't have done. I was hoping my teammates were close enough that his gun bloom would keep him detected. But unfortunately, one of our Hindenburgs that was in range went down at the exact moment I decided to smoke. And so then that destroyer didn't stay spotted, and he got away. When you're playing Asashio, you got to recognize who is spotting if you smoke up like that. You're not going to get as much value and damage in on those destroyers if you start that engagement and instantly smoke up when you're the only one possibly spotting, even if they shoot their guns. Typically, that's what I'm waiting for that enemy destroyer to shoot at me. Their gun bloom gets them detected, hopefully by my teammates around me, and then I smoke up. And then they're still detected for that 20 seconds or more if they continue shooting, and we can do some big damage into them. That's kind of the idea, but it does rely on you having your teammates there to spot for you. Turret traverse problems, but you already know that from Kagero, certainly. And yay, that DD still does go down. We've done all the damage we're going to do at this point, and just look at that spotting rack up here. We got 140k spotting, a cap, and 23,000 damage. And we're going to get a lot of base XP. I was surprised. It seems like Wargaming is doing a better job of rewarding spotting damage, rewarding cap control, rewarding damage into destroyers. Much more valuable than damage into battleships, say. It's all percentage based. How much percent damage did you do to that enemy ship, I think, is how it gets rewarded. Even 10 spotted ribbons, and that is 2.5k base. Somehow, I don't know how, with such little damage, but there's a lot of utility there. And so even though I wouldn't personally get this ship, I certainly can see the benefits of it if you enjoy this playstyle. And you can only get it during this Black Friday event. That is the only time for this ship, Asashio, Massachusetts, Alaska, and John Bart's. So this is the time if you're interested in this playstyle. In fact, I was having an interesting conversation on stream about this ship and its playstyle. It's a bit like brawling battleships in a way. This is a bit of a stretch, okay? But hear me out. The ships are very focused, almost one tricks on a certain playstyle, where Asashio is purely focused on spotting and then just crushing battleships as they push in. Brawling secondary battleships are kind of just one tricks at that too. They're only good at close range when you're getting in secondaries and pushing, but the meta doesn't always support that. And sometimes you're just locked out of those scenarios, and that can be very frustrating. But I am okay with that because I personally enjoy that brawl so much that I'm fine with some of the games just being a wash, where my ship is not very useful because it's not good at long range. I think that's a similar argument you can make for Asashio, where it is going to get locked out in some of these matches, where you just can't get in range to get good Torp strikes. Sure, you can launch the Torps at 20, but it's hard to land Torps at 20 kilometers. It's more hope and dreams that are going to get you Torps there. Maybe zoning Torps through certain choke points, certainly. But then you get the games that allow you to play the flank, play that incredible torpedo threat and crush the enemy battleships. And maybe you're someone who really, really enjoys that playstyle, and that's your favorite, much like the brawling battleships are my favorite, and you're willing to sacrifice some of those games that are going to lock you out. And I can see that. I really do think that's an interesting comparison there. So if you're a Torpo player, I can see this being a very, very good ship to pick up, while still giving you some ability in those games that you will get locked out on. Again, double carriers, double sub. That's pretty rough matchmaker for a torpedo boat. And we still managed to do an okay job. And I think that's thanks to the extra torp range, making me still feel like I could contribute, send those zoning torps out and try and do that. Instead of getting overly aggressive with a Kagero for those 10-kilometer range torps, I'm probably dying a lot earlier because I'm trying to get in range to actually make use of them. I can play a little bit more relaxed with an Asashio instead of something like a Kagero. But you'll have to let me know. I'm just kind of speculating here since this isn't my favorite playstyle. But that was an interesting discussion, I think, that I had on stream about this ship and its playstyle. The build, of course, you're just going full Torp build here. I don't think there's a good reason to go for the guns personally, but maybe you could swap some skills. I think Swift and Silence is very interesting as well. Sure, it does nerf your guns even harder, but getting your speed up a little bit more, maneuvering around the map quicker is very, very nice, especially as I've been playing La Pampa recently, and that ship is very slow as well. Asashio, much quicker, allowing you to get those flanks in, reposition to where the enemy team is pushing, also a very nice thing to have. Where if you're a little slower, I don't think it's a lot harder to make good value of those torpedoes, because not every flank are you going to be able to use your torps effectively. Sometimes you have to reposition, and having that extra speed is very nice. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Definitely check down there if you're interested in this ship. There's going to be people who love playing torpedo boats, and they'll give you some good recommendations and thoughts about this ship down there. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.